Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. Thank you for joining us for another 30-minute skills. For those joining us for the first time, welcome. These monthly lessons are a quick and efficient way to hone your reporting skills and build on your First Amendment knowledge, but they're also more than that. As those who join us every month already know, these lessons are a way for you to reconnect with a community of journalists, researchers, attorneys, and academics. So to everyone, please use the chat to introduce yourself, showcase your own work, connect with others. Also, make sure you register for our upcoming lessons, such as how to start your own podcast, how to create a nonprofit newsroom, and how to use the Signal messaging app. Registration links can be found at nfac.org. Previous 30-minute skills are available at nfac.org as well, and on our YouTube channel, 5 Freedoms. Today's presentation is the first of 2 writing workshops. It's supported in part by the estate of Gloria L. Negri. Gloria was a trailblazing journalist at the Boston Globe for more than 50 years, and this program is part of her legacy of newsroom education and her lifelong commitment to local journalism. You can learn more about Gloria and other NEFAC supporters at nfac.org/supporters. During today's presentation, I again encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat and share your own experiences and resources. You can also use the chat or the Q&A button to ask questions of our instructor and request feedback on your own writing. We'll get to as many of your questions as possible. We have a lot to cover, not a lot of time, so let's get started. Ed, all yours.
Hi, I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. I've got one potted plant here for today's workshop. If you come back to the second one, I'll be between 2 potted plants. I'm a reporter for the Boston Globe here in Rhode Island. I've been a member of the NEFAC board for about 10 years now. Previously, I was at the Providence Journal for 16 years. I covered the courts. I covered the State House. I was the political columnist for a while. I also worked at the Hartford Courant and the Albany Times Union. As you can hear from my accent, I'm a native Rhode Islander. And I went to Syracuse University where I majored in magazine journalism. And that is kind of what I want to talk about today, because one thing that I learned in the Syracuse magazine journalism program was about how to structure a story. And it's this structure that I'm going to talk about today is something I've used over the past 37 years in daily journalism. To tell you the truth, I never went into magazine journalism, but I think all the kind of the architecture of a story is something I've used throughout my career. And the thing that has stuck with me came from this book, Magazine Editing by Jay Cubbard. He was the head of the magazine department. And I can't remember anything else in this book. I'm not sure I even read it, but the chapter on story organization I've thought about every time I come to a point that you probably all have encountered numerous times, where you've got a notebook full of quotes, you've got great interviews, you've got documents, you've talked to the person that you're profiling, you've talked to their enemies, their political opponents, you've got every record you can hold on to, and then you're there at the computer with that cursor blinking and all this tons of information stuffed into your brain, and you write the dateline, Providence in my case, and then your question is, now what? And you can wing it and start typing and see how it goes. But I've always tried to use this structure as I unload my notebook, and it comes down. It looks crazy right now, but I'll explain all of this. This is the anatomy of a profile, but I want to say up front, this is something that you can use if you're writing a column. I've used it doing column writing. It's something I think you can do in an op-ed and all kinds of different stories. It's really well suited, though, for personality profiles. If you're writing about a politician, if you're writing about the head of a CEO, so to go through the different elements of this. And how to arrange a story, the architecture, kind of the framework of where you put things, is at the very top, a lead anecdote. And that is the story, a story within a story, where you want to use some action, some strong verbs. You want to create a little scene. and hook people. You know, you've got to have some have done the reporting to have a story to tell and to show the person you're profiling in action. And if you can do that, you want to choose. You can't just choose any anecdote, though. You've got to choose an anecdote that is going to bring you to your nut graph, bring you to the point that you want to make about this person. And you know, again, you have to do the research and the interviewing to have this material. But once you've got it, pick one that makes your point and brings you there, and then write that nut graph. This is why you decided to profile this person. This is what you would tell your mother if she asked you what the story is about. Write that nut graph, and the anecdote has to flow right into it. So that's the top square is the anecdote, and then you've got the nut graph there in the second element, and then the circles and squares in the diagram are well, let me just stop for a second and tell you a bit about where this diagram comes from. It was created by a man named Robert Ruark, and he was, at the time, he lived from 1915 to 1965. And he died from drinking. So, but besides being a good drinker, he was also a very good writer. He had written 6 books. He had a syndicated column. He was one of the most successful journalists in his time. And he was in a hotel bar in Houston when he drew this. He was talking to an editor at the Houston Chronicle. And he said, you know, how do you've done all these? I think he had done more than 1,000 profiles for magazines or some kind of magazine article. And he said, well, how do you do it? And he said, well, the editors all want the same thing. I'll show you. And he took out a piece of copy paper, used copy paper at the time for if you were a journalist, and he drew this at the hotel bar, drinking some dry martinis in the hotel there in Houston. So Robert Ruark is the one who gave us this, and he said, you know, start with the anecdotal lead, go to the nut graph, and then once you've and you got to spend some time doing that section of the story. But once you get there and you've got your lead anecdote and you've got your nut graph, you have to have a justification. And this section here with the X's and O's as the justification, and what it is proving your point. You've said that Justin Silverman is an incredible Syracuse University graduate, and now you've got 3 examples to prove that point. And you've used your reporting and you've got, don't use 2, don't use 4. It's kind of the Holy Trinity. You've got 3 points of justification, and they should be disparate. It can't be all from just his sophomore year. You've got to have from different points in Justin's life, you have to prove the point that he is one of the best Syracuse graduates that you can imagine. By this point, you should have made it's like making a case to the reader. You've proven your point. You're going to hook them. And then the next section is amplification. This is where you dip into your notebook to use all those quotes, all those anecdotes, all the information that you've gleaned through your reporting to really flesh out who Justin Silverman is and make people really know what a great Syracuse graduate he is, for example. So, but then you get to the point where people are saying, well, is this just another Justin Silverman fluff piece? Are we going to hear anything critical about this guy? Is he a real human being, or is it just a cardboard cutout of him? And that's where you need to have done the reporting to, and often I'm writing about political figures, gubernatorial candidates, for instance, so it's easy to go to their political opponents. And or then maybe they had ethics violations in the past, or ethics fines, and you can find what Ruark called the nose picker, or the wart, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of having some kind of wart, some kind of nose picker in your story, because it actually makes the person more three-dimensional and the whole story more believable. Now, the caveat is if the downside, the wart about someone is a felony conviction, or some horrible anecdote that you've heard, then maybe you have a different story. Maybe you shouldn't be doing the one you're doing. You should maybe have that as your anecdotal lead and a different nut graph. But if this is an interesting person who has accomplished something, you want to give a chance. This is where you talk to their critics, you talk to their political opponents, you talk about something from their past that doesn't reflect that well on them, but maybe you ask them about in an interview to respond to. So you can see there you've got the three triangles pointing down to the nose picker. Now you've got a three-dimensional portrait of someone. And this is where you're going to spend most of your work as a writer, is to craft this part. And by now, if you've done your job, if you've got the material, you've got the reader hooked. And they want to know more about this person. Where did this person come from? And you can try to arrange these in different ways. But I think if you do, like if you started, and you've seen this probably, people will start a profile at the beginning. But we don't, why do we care where this person was born and where they went to high school or whatever, or where they're going next? That if you started with that, that's not really important. That's not going to grab people because they don't know why they care in the first place. But if you've structured it this way with anecdotal lead, a nut graph saying what your point is, what your thesis is, you've justified it, proven your point, and then unpack that and really provided more detail, and then given the other side, the minority report on this person, then you can go to the flashback. That's where you're going to say born in Providence in 1970, etc. Then, and that becomes easy. This is an easy portion to write. This is the biography that you've got all this information in your notebook. You can just pour right into this shape, into this portion of the story, go through their education, go through their early career, go through some of their formative experiences. And it's a tick-tock. You're just going forward in time. So it's easy to structure, and you don't want to start there. This is the middle of the story, like this is the place for that. But it brings you right up to where you in current time. It brings you right up to today. And then you can do another nose picker. If you've got two, you can add that element in there. Again, if the subject, one thing to talk about the nose pickers a little bit more, that what Ruark said about him was that paragons of virtue are always boring. The ancient Greeks knew this. The doings of their gods and goddesses intrigue today, not because of their great strength, but because those strengths were coupled with terrible weaknesses. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, repeatedly attempted to murder Psyche for falling in love with her son, and great Zeus himself took the liberty of marrying his sister Hera and usurping his own father from his position as the Lord of creation. So, if you've got someone who or someone who married their sister, obviously that should be a different story in the lead anecdote. But if you don't, if you get something a little milder, this is another place for a nose picker. And now we're up to date. And one other point on the warts there is you want to signpost it. You don't want to just flow into an anecdote or some facts that you're just unloading all of a sudden in the story. You want to tell people what the point is. While this person has had 2 excellent years as governor, they've also had 2 ethics fines as governor in those 2 years, and showing that they might be vulnerable in the next election, to make that up entirely. And so you want to you want to signpost what you're doing in these portions of the story to tell the reader what your point is. And you don't have to, it's not your opinion. You're just saying what this section means, and then show it. So once you've done that, and you've done the flashback, now we come to the section. We're pretty far into the story, and this section is called Whither. In other words, you're answering the question, what is next for this person? And you can see in an interview, you'd be like, well, are you going to run for re-election? Are you, what if you're interviewing the superintendent, what's coming up in the school year? What does the future hold? So you probably are quoting them or quoting other people that you interviewed. And then what you want to do at the end of the story is the get out of town anecdote that you see here in the box at the bottom. This is another anecdote. You want to dip into that notebook, find another story within a story, probably your second best story. Best story should be up top in the lead. But at the end of the story, this is another telling anecdote, not just a stray one, something that ideally should echo the lead. It should amplify the point and wrap. If you can do this, that it's a similar type of anecdote with similar point, similar theme, from another point of view. You can see this arrow that goes from the top to the bottom. It will echo the lead anecdote, and for the reader, that really wraps it in a bow. It tells the reader that, well, the story's it's over now, and I get the point, and it hammers home that point. And it's much better than, and you've seen, I'm sure, lots of stories that just kind of peter out with extraneous facts, some of the less important facts that someone had in their notebook. That's not the way to do it. If you've got a really good anecdote, two anecdotes, put one in the lead, one at the end, and then you're done. To go to the next slide, I just want to show you in this book on magazine editing, it included an actual profile of Senator William Proxmire, former senator from Wisconsin. The book chronicled the different points of it, outlined the different points, showed how you did the anecdotal lead, how you had the nut graph, how that was justified and amplified. And the thing you'll notice in this story is it didn't really have any warts. I think it was in Reader's Digest, and that might explain it. But it suffered for that. It turned out when you read it, it comes across as something that the senator might have put out as a press release. And that was kind of the point, is that you want to have that full view and have done the research to have a full view of someone. So I'm going to stop there, and I've got a few tips to end with, but I just want to see if anybody is working on any stories where profiles or other stories where you're trying to organize it, or if you have any questions.
Thanks, Ed. Great stuff. No questions thus far. Maybe you can dive into some of these tips.
So my number one tip to journalism students or fellow journalists is always to panic early. I've panicked many times, and if I panic when I get the tip, when I get the story idea, and get after right away, it's the writing just improves exponentially from there based on how much time you give yourself. And something also from the Syracuse days, William Zinsser came to visit. He wrote the book on writing well, and it's always stuck with me that rewriting is the essence of writing, that, just because I've reached that word limit, I'm not done yet. I'm just getting going. And the more I rewrite something, of course, you have deadline, and you've got to spit it out sometimes. But if you're working on a profile or something more in depth, the rewriting is so essential. That writing's hard work. What we're doing here is tough stuff, and a clear sentence is no accident.
And if I could jump in just to focus on the hard work part, the
Yeah.
process. Question for you: how do you choose what to cut or edit? One of our attendees says they're often finding themselves struggling to self-edit and wanting to include everything and not knowing what to cut, what to keep. Any suggestions or advice?
Yeah, I mean, if you when I am that's a struggle I have too. Is sometimes you've got so much good material and only so much uh, real estate to work with, a word limit and all that. So I guess I try to look at that diagram and fill in the essential elements first. Like if I've got two good anecdotes, I want to put those in there. If I've got the other side of some of the critics, I put them in there along with the supporters. And I always try to eliminate the stuff I cut is if it's interesting, it's could be in there, but it doesn't really fit into the thesis. It's not pulling enough weight to make the final cut.
All right, got a few more questions here.
Sure.
Let's keep going. One comment, let's see, attendee writes, most good rules often have instances where you should break them. Can you, Ed, think of a successful example where you might have deviated from the structure that you just explained? And if you can think of an example, what made it the right choice to deviate from that structure and break that rule?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure like there have been many times where I haven't followed this structure precisely. And sometimes one excellent reason to do it is if you have such a good anecdote that you can break it up. And this is I think of this as going to a higher level in narrative writing, where if you can start an anecdote, and I had a student do this at Roger Williams, where she was a big Taylor Swift fan, right? So I was like, write about anything you care about, and she cared about one thing, Taylor Swift. And so it was a semester-long project, and so she wrote a story about how someone had gotten an award and to go into the mansion here in Rhode Island, Taylor Swift's mansion. So she brought us in the anecdotal lead right up to the gate. And we're just about to go into the mansion. She stopped, told you everything about the mansion, about Taylor Swift's career, and gave you all that background, all the justification and everything. And then at the very end, instead of some other anecdote, she started the narrative going forward, and you went into the gate and saw the mansion and the party and the celebrities, and you were hooked, and it was a great way to do it. So I mean, that would be one that doesn't fit this model exactly, but it's kind of like the next step.
Good example. Thank you. A couple other questions. Let's go back to the nose pickers. Where would you draw the line in determining when a nose picker is bad enough to change the story entirely?
Yeah, that I think you have to take that case by case. Like if I gave an example of a murder or marrying your sister, but it's never that clear cut, right? I mean, it's if you've got an accountability story, maybe it's not. If you found out something that's I think it would depend if it's something fresh that's really holding someone accountable, a really negative fact. Maybe you want to write that story first and then include it in the profile later to give greater context. But if if it's juicy and new and really damning, that's a different story.
Got it. One more question for you, and then I'll let you wrap up with the remainder of your top 10 tips. When pitching, how would you work the warts in as an interesting extra bit of context?
In pitching to the editors?
I assume so.
Yeah. I don't think I have to overemphasize that, but I always say, even when I'm interviewing people, I say, who's your biggest fan and who's your worst enemy? I want to talk to both of them, and it kind of gives them a heads up that I'm going to do that, and this isn't going to be a puff piece. I'm going to talk to everybody that loves you and hates you, And the readers appreciate that, I think.
Great. Thanks, Ed. We only have a few more minutes. So once you take us through the remainder of your top 10 tips, and then I'll have you give your contact information to everybody as we conclude.
Yeah, so on writing well, I could have saved the Syracuse tuition if I just read that book. I think it's great. Strip every sentence to its cleanest components. And I was in academia for a couple of years, and the highfalutin language they use there is terrible. At this point in time, they always say instead of now. Most important sentence in any article is the first. Second most important is the last, the kicker. Leads you, as I said, was usually what you tell your mother or the nut graph in a profile. Most adverbs are unnecessary. Use active verbs. Joe hit him instead of he was hit by Joe. Read, 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 write. And fear and coffee. That's why I told some students. And Tim White, former fellow NEFAC board member, also teaches at Roger Williams, and the students told him that my advice was beer and coffee, and that is not my advice. Fear and coffee. Beer is not going to help, at least not before deadline. Thank you for joining us today and taking these 30 minutes. And seriously, if anybody has any questions, shoot me an email. And if you want to bounce some ideas off me, I'd be happy to help.
Ed, I want to thank you very much for providing this lesson. Really looking forward to your follow-up next month. And want to thank everybody for joining us today. As a reminder, we provide these lessons as a public service to you. So please return the favor and encourage your colleagues and friends to join us as well each month. We have a lot to learn from each other, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. On behalf of NEFAC, thank you for all you do, and we'll see you next month for our next 30-minute skills. Take care, everybody.